right, welcome everyone. Please take your seats. Thank you so much for coming out here today since probably nothing else historic is happening in this city, so thank you for choosing to come here today. So my name is Hannah One, and I'm the board chair of Solid Ground, of Board of Directors for Solid Ground. And today's conversation is one in a series of social justice salons coordinated by Solid Ground over the last few years. And I have to say, the interest in today's event was absolutely overwhelming. So thank you for coming out here and being a part of it. So the level of response just really shows how much our community wants to have this important conversation because it cuts to the very core of what we stand to lose and what is at risk. So we will be hearing from community organizations who will share what they have been up against as they do the work on the ground to maintain the health and safety of our communities and neighbors. So this conversation might get a little bit uncomfortable, even a bit scary, but we are all in this together. So thank you for being here to be a part of it. So before we start, I have a few announcements to make. First, I would like to thank all of our sponsors who made this event possible, especially our visionary sponsor, BECU, and our media sponsor, the Seattle Times. This conversation is being recorded by the folks at Town Hall Seattle, and the video will be available online probably by the end of this week. And in order to minimize distractions, we ask that members of the audience refrain from live streaming or recording this event, and we appreciate your cooperation with that. This event is expected to go on for about 2 hours, so please do what you need to stay comfortable and take care of yourselves. There are restrooms through the doors on both sides of the stage. And if you look towards the areas in the back, you'll find some tasty food and snacks provided by our partners at Fair Start, so please help yourselves. All right, so let's get started. As I mentioned, today's event is part of our Social Justice Salon series, where we can have deep dive conversations about the challenges we face as human services providers and work towards finding a solution that moves us forward. Solid Ground has organized several of these events, and we have covered issues related to supportive housing, generational poverty and youth development, behavioral health care, and food equity. So when planning the topic for today's discussion, there was really only one thing we could possibly talk about, and that is what is happening right now at the federal level. What does it mean for our work, especially our social justice work? And most importantly, what does it mean for the communities we serve? And with the current political climate, these tough conversations were usually held behind closed doors, but we thought now was the right time to talk about these questions out in the open and head on. And with that, I would like to introduce our fantastic group of panelists who will be leading this discussion. So let's welcome them up to the stage. All right, so let's do some bios as they're coming up to the stage. We are very fortunate to have Naomi Ishisaka here to moderate this conversation. Yeah. Naomi is Assistant Managing Editor for Diversity and Inclusion, as well as the social justice columnist for the Seattle Times. You can check out her column every Monday in the Times. Naomi is a lifelong Seattle resident and has worked at newspapers across Puget Sound, including the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, the Tacoma News Tribune, and the Bremerton Sun. She served for 8 years as editor-in-chief of the award-winning Colors Northwest magazine, a monthly magazine focusing on communities of color in the Northwest. Welcome, Naomi.
Thank you. Thank you.
Also on our panel today, we have Rhonda Banchero, who is the Director of Organizational Equity and Inclusion at the Downtown Emergency Service Center, DESC. Where she has worked to integrate the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion into the organization's DNA. Also a native of Seattle, Rhonda's career includes playing pro basketball for the American Basketball League Seattle Reign, Portland Power, the WNBA Sacramento Monarchs, as well as teams in Israel and Taiwan. So sports are happening here tonight. All right. And next up, our next panelist is our very own Shalimar Gonzales. Shalimar joined Solid Ground as our CEO in January 2021 and led our organization through the COVID pandemic, launching a new compensation model, and unveiling a new strategic plan. Her focus on coalition building is informed by her deep commitment to intersectional justice. She also serves on the boards for Community Roots Housing and the Washington State Community Action Partnership. Next, we have Regina Malveaux, who serves as Chief Impact Officer at United Way of King County. And her team works with private and public partners to drive efforts to build a racially just community in which everyone has equitable access to housing, food, education, and financial stability. She began a career in community services as a legal advocate at YWCA of San Diego, then going on to lead YWs located in Southampton Roads, Virginia, and Spokane, Washington. Regina also served in Governor Jay Inslee's cabinet as executive director of the Washington State Women's Commission. Finally, I would like to introduce Estela Ortega, one of the founders of El Centro de la Raza. And Estela has served as executive director since 2009. And she has spent more than half a century building El Centro into a hub for all people who want to engage in civic action through community empowerment. Estela's unwavering commitment to this work has earned recognition from the National Education Association, the Northwest Progressive Institute, and in 2020, she was named one of the Seattle Times 13 most influential people of the decade. So thank you all for bringing your experience and expertise to today's discussion. And with that, I will turn it over to our moderator, Naomi.
Great. Thank you so much, Hannah. And thank you all for being here today. It's wonderful to see all of you here, especially given that I know there's some kind of baseball game happening today. But you'll be, we'll have plenty of time, hopefully not 15 innings worth, to see the rest of it. So as you all know, the nonprofits represented by our panelists today are part of a network of organizations that form the modern day safety net in U.S. society. When our neighbors need food and shelter, or at risk of losing their homes, or need help getting job training or medical or behavioral health care, these are the organizations they turn to. It's a sort of unspoken society contract. Nonprofit organizations take on the role of providing critical social services that the government does not provide, and the government provides funding that allows them to do their work. But as everyone in this room knows, that relationship has changed dramatically under the current administration. Instead of being a reliable partner for safety net nonprofits, the administration has become something closer to an adversary, cutting and threatening to cut funding for nonprofits, demanding changes that strike at their mission and values, and scaling back critical programs for the communities that they serve. So some of the questions that we're exploring today are, what does this changing relationship mean for the services your organizations provide, and for the tens of thousands of people in King County that rely on them? And what can we do to ensure communities get the services they rely on? So I hope as we go along, you'll start thinking of questions that you want to ask the panelists so that, in the last half an hour or so, we get to hear from you, because I know that's what often makes the most interesting conversation. So start thinking about those questions now. So the first question is, so much has happened in the last 10 months, and it's affected us all in really different ways. It can be hard to keep track of what's happened and what's ahead, but I want to ask Regina, and starting with you, because as a major funder of human services across King County, United Way has a unique voice in how our region's nonprofits are doing. So what are you hearing from them? What actions by the federal government affected them the most? And what has that meant for the communities they serve?
Oh my goodness. Well, United Way really works, as you might know, with both private sector partners, public sector partners, and folks like you who really support the work of the 150-ish organizations that we serve. And as early as late March, when the funding freeze took place, and even though it was overturned right away, people rightfully became very fearful. And we did a survey to get a sense of, among our grantees, how much federal funding they received and how they might be impacted. And what we learned is that of the 44 food banks that are part of our network, 81% of them relied on federal funding, and it was more than at least 60% of their funding. So food security actually seems to be the sector within our sector that is the hardest hit right now. Really, really, I don't know any other way to say it other than disgusting. Very recent thing that's happened is just since the federal shutdown, the program WIC, which stands for Women, Infants, and Children, is at risk. And as of last week, there was only one more week of funding to support that program. And now the state has stepped in and provided at least another 30 days. But these are the kind of really drastic and kind of draconian things that our nonprofits are experiencing. And I really appreciate it. I can't recall whether this is the time for me to talk about it or not, but I think so. One of the things I really appreciated is that the Seattle Foundation convened many of the local philanthropic organizations. And as you all know, Seattle is a very, very wealthy community with lots of corporate headquarters that can more than afford to support our neighbors who need support. And so really appreciated that in that convening, there was universal agreement that while certainly the philanthropic sector can't fill, all of the need of the devastation that's being created by the current administration, we did recognize that there was a significant need for us to do more than we currently were, and really proud that United Way joined the Seattle Foundation in launching something called the Care and Response Fund. The good news is, between us, the fund was about $1.3 million, and again, it was created really to try to help drive additional investment from other philanthropic groups. But of that 1.3 million, we had more than 200 applicants, and we're actually only able to fund about 35 of them. So that tells you how significant the need and how challenging it is to meet that need. But really proud of folks like you who are working hard to help support stepping into the moment.
Thank you. And how about the rest of you? How's the federal government actions affected your work, and what future actions do you worry about the most? You want to start, Estela?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. What specific actions by the federal government have most affected your work, and what future actions are you most concerned about?
Well, obviously, there has been some loss of funding in terms of services to youth. I think we all know about what we heard just recently with WIC being paused and just the impacts in particular to us, because we run a home visiting program, and so we're helping those families, receive the WIC program and also sign up. Those are a couple of things, and I think the greatest challenge is how are we going to solve this problem, because it's not just a question of the federal government, but it's a bigger question in terms of democracy and our rights and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Shalimar?
In some ways, I almost don't know how to answer that question. I'm just like, it's terrible. It's really, really hard right now. And I think if you watch the news, if you look at any of the social media sites, if you just go outside and talk to your neighbors, you will find that there is a lot of people with a lot of concerns, a lot of people experiencing a lot of trauma. The story about WIC having 30 more days, SNAP ending in 30 days. I mean, we're talking about infants potentially starving in this country. We're talking about seniors and adults and families not having enough food in this country, in a country that should have plenty of it, but yet somehow we don't have enough to go around. And those are all policy choices. And so when I really think about the impacts that we're seeing in communities, it's the things that we see on a daily basis. It's people looking for housing, and there's not enough housing because we, for some reason, can't figure out how to resource housing. And as an organization, very similar to Estela, that has experienced cuts, and we've lost almost $500,000 at this point from the federal government, from that funding sources. The only thing we can really do is put our hope back into community and into organizations like United Way, who gather communities together as stakeholders to say, how can we come together as one to continue to support our neighbors that are in need, and not othering folks, but really saying, these are our neighbors, and I don't want my neighbor to starve, I don't want my neighbor to be homeless, I don't want my neighbor to not have health care, and so I'm gonna do what we need to do.
And looking ahead, are there things that you are particularly concerned about?
Everything. Everything, but I'm watching very closely what's happening at the Supreme Court with trans rights. I am a full believer that this particular administration taught us and told us their first time around what was going to happen, and we're seeing it in real time now, and that was one of the groups of folks that they targeted the first time around, and so I'm very concerned about that, particularly around healthcare and for folks that are trans. The other pieces that we're thinking about, kind of the future for organizations, is just, and I know that we're talking about King County, but in rural communities, we have quite a few nonprofits. We have a lot of nonprofits, let's be honest, in King County that are doing exceptional work to support and help communities. But in rural communities, there might be one food bank. There might be one anti-poverty organization. There might be one organization that's doing women's rights support. And so when they lose funding, who is supporting that entire community? There's nobody left, right? And so my concern oftentimes is what happens when all the social safety nets are gone in this country, and what sort of chaos that is going to lead to.
Thank you. Rhonda?
Yeah, I mean, for DSC, we house folks who are unhoused, have significant substance use disorder, mental health challenges, and so they are already othered in society. And we've seen about a $4 million cut thus far, which is greatly impacting the services that we, aim to and have been providing for over 40 years. And the future, that first chance the administration didn't necessarily have an opportunity to focus on permanent supportive housing and harm reduction services, but we are in roughly around page 500 to 512, depending on how you download Project 2025, that focuses specifically on undoing the premise of permanent supportive housing, or housing first. They do not believe in harm reduction, and for those of you who don't know what harm reduction is, as we practice it, it is providing safe paraphernalia, if you will, for people to use. We are a very low barrier organization for folks to have housing and wraparound services. But harm reduction is also condoms and safe sex materials, and so they're looking to pretty much zero us out as far as being able to handle or to hand out harm reduction. And so we're really trying to grapple with what that will do to the community in terms of spread of disease and just the impact it will have, that people won't be able to count on harm reduction supplies, as well as just the cut in behavioral health services and housing first. This administration, I'm sure some of you have heard, they really believe that if you are able-bodied, you should be able to work, not taking into account mental health and some of the other comorbidities that can happen when you are chronically unhoused and dealing with some of those behavioral health challenges. So we're definitely, we are, I believe we're one of the 2 largest permanent supportive housing agencies in the country, and I don't think we're number 2. So the spotlight is going to be shown very brightly on us. We, as Shalimar just mentioned, because we are such a large permanent supportive housing organization, we get folks from all jurisdictions in King County that are counting on us for services and housing. And so if we go away, or if we have major cuts, the impact is going to be felt pretty much all over the county, and we're going to be talking about thousands of people that are currently housed in one of our DESC properties that are going to be unhoused. And so what will that do to the communities and what those communities will shape into?
And does that also kind of account for what you're concerned about in the future as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. These folks count on us. Oftentimes DESC is the last stop for these folks in terms of their just very survival. And so if for some reason we go away, then those services will go away, and traditional behavioral health, mental health, and housing doesn't work for this marginalized population.
It also seems like the attacks on harm reduction are very much tied to sort of the larger attacks on cities like Seattle or Portland or other cities that seem to fit this idea of kind of, progressivism run amok sort of
Yes,
thing.
Democratic, blue, left-leaning, we're all under fire. And, I think that this current administration, certainly the person sitting in the Oval Office, has made no bones about their target for their administration to dismantle some of the things that we've been able to build.
Naomi, may I add, Estela touched on a really, really important issue when she mentioned democracy. So I think all of our organizations early on experienced that many folks who we traditionally support have been afraid to come to our organizations to receive services, given what they see happening in the news, and ICE appearing and disappearing people. And so beyond the federal cuts, there's the fear that's been created that keeps people who need our help the most in their homes and not out in community where they can be helped.
And I also want to add to that today we just had a meeting this morning with our leadership group where a wonderful immigration attorney came and told us, talked to us about how we were going to talk to our staff and talk to our clients about knowing their rights. And we have the cards that folks are going to be able to hand out, hopefully have the opportunity to hand out if they are approached by ICE, what to do if they come to into our building. And what I found myself grappling with personally was the idea that we are talking about this from a place of lawfulness, and they are enacting some of these practices with lawlessness. And I think that really stokes and certainly fuels the fears that I think we all have in this room. Certainly those of us who are brown, who know that we can be judged, pulled over, and stopped just by the color of our skin. So just that fear that we're operating from a place of lawfulness and they're operating from a place of lawlessness really puts a huge gap and divide in how these things will play out.
Anyone else want to add to that? All right, so thank you. As your organizations face these new threats from the federal government, the communities you serve are facing a loss of critical support for food and housing and medical care, like we've talked about, and cuts to SNAP and HUD and Medicaid. And then there's also immigration raids that have upended countless families and disrupted normal life in communities of color across King County. And want to know how this has impacted the communities you serve and the ways in which you meet their needs. And Estela, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, obviously El Centro has 43 different programs in the areas of children and youth, education services, economic development, housing, and so forth. And so there's different responses in terms of how people see that. For instance, in our youth programs, as an example, our kids, they're suffering from anxiety, they can't sleep, they're drinking that bull drink that gives you a lot of energy. I mean, that's, their reaction because they're having a hard time. Some people are going back to their countries. They're leaving while the going is good, if you will, instead of being, picked up and put into some, encampment, and who knows what's going to be happening. Or they get sent, as you all know, to different countries that have no logic for them to be there. Our business opportunity, where people are learning how to start a business, expand their business. Those people are afraid to go to workshops, if you will, but at the same time to meet their livelihood, because we organize them to be at pop-up mercados and so forth. They'll sign up because they know they have to. That's the way they're going to, to feed their families. An increase in our legal clinic where people are coming, basically, how do I become a citizen? I mean, even not realizing what that process really is, and are getting help with emergency safety planning. And so El Centro responded. We have 9 different locations, and we set up rapid response teams in all of those different sites where the staff take on these responsibilities. And sort of a next phase that we're going to do is reaching out the doors of El Centro and who are our neighbors, so that they can also become a part of those rapid response teams. Because I think as we've seen, there's been some examples around the country, and in particular, I remember seeing a case in Chicago where this man, he refused to get into, the vehicle, and kept asking for help. And people, off the street, people stopping their cars, came to help him. And so that was a great example, is that we need to get others involved in our work, in our neighborhoods, and so forth. We also have done Know Your Rights trainings, also, to our staff and to participants, and have also used radio, because it's a safer way to get this information out, where people might be afraid to, go to locations, and ICE is there. So, and then continuing to do more outreach services. And so this work is continual. We have to get the word out that, that this is the work that we're doing, and how we can help people.
Thank you. Just out of curiosity, would you say that this sort of period that we are in right now, does this seem like a pretty, extreme outlier to what you've seen over the course of your work with El Centro?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of it.
Just looking at kind of the moment that we're in right now, would you say this is kind of an outlier moment from the years that you've been involved in El Centro?
Well, no, I am inspired by the way our people in this city and across the country have been responding to help. And there's a sense that the Trump administration tries to put forward that they're strong, that they're winning, but they're not. They're not winning. It may seem like it, especially when the news doesn't report accurately on what's happening in our cities and across the country, because people are protesting a lot, but we're not hearing that. And, the courts, we're winning some court battles. Obviously today the Supreme Court is listening to the Voting Rights Act, and what is going to happen there. And, that's the speculation, is that 6 of the justices are going to, vote to eliminate the Second Amendment there. So we've got our work cut out for us. I want to thank Shalimar and her team for pulling us together to create a sense of community, that we're not alone, that we should be interacting with each other. And every one of us has something to do, something to do that can contribute. And that's what we need to organize our communities around.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to start on this time. Rhonda, you want to answer that question?
Yeah, so, we talked about some of the cuts that we've already experienced, and, the harm reduction is happening right now in terms of the threat that we will not be able to provide harm reduction supplies to our clients. And that's just gonna have a huge community impact. Public health, and I'll just leave it there. Public health is gonna be at risk if we're unable to provide these supplies to our clients and to folks who come into our buildings asking for them. I think the other thing, I want to focus too on what Estela said about outreach. I was at an intimate setting with the incumbent mayor, and there were several people in the room that I had not known before meeting them yesterday. And once they heard that I work at DESC and found out what it is we do, the first thing that everyone asked was, what can they do? And I think that that's really important, because had I not been in that room, had I not been part of that conversation, they wouldn't have had an opportunity to ask. I wouldn't have had an opportunity to get their contact information and come back to our leadership and ask, what is it they can do? Some of us have more means than others, but if you hear about things a clothing drive, socks, shoes with good soles that people can walk around in the winter that might be unhoused or have trouble getting shoes. Those are small, little micro things that you can do that really can mean a lot to an organization. Coats, blankets, things like that, baby supplies, anything that you can do, just think about it, ask, and ask your community. We were having trouble, for instance, with large size shoes are hard for folks who are unhoused or who are in need if they're like over a size 11. Well, you heard I played basketball. I have large children who play basketball still, and that was a really easy thing for me to do, was to reach out to my Facebook community and say, hey, all of you who played basketball, yes, the shoes might not be, great for playing and for performance, but someone who is unhoused or someone who needs shoes with good soles, those shoes will be good for years. Mm-hmm. And so, they asked, where can I bring them? I had them bring them, drop them right at my porch, and I, took them right into DESC. So those small things, being parts of community conversations where you're meeting people and hearing about things that they need that you may be able to offer or give, or somebody may be able to offer or give. As far as for us, how is it going to impact? We're having budget conversations, but there's a blank line, right? Because we don't know the funding that we're going to receive. We know that it is probably going to be significantly less. And so we're just best case and worst case scenarioing things right now, and trying to make plans for, best case, worst case, and anything in between. And that's just the best that we can do. And we're really, just trying to hunker down and wait to see where the chips fall.
I've been reflecting a lot recently about, I've been watching a lot of Lovecraft Country, for those that know that show. But I've been thinking a lot, actually, about the Underground Railroad in recent times. And in my thinking and reflecting about that, I've really been kind of thinking about it in the times that we're in this moment, that kind of in the cover of night, in hunkering down, and trying to pull communities together to bring resources to each other. That is the state that we're in right now. And so oftentimes I tell myself, our people are used to this, however you define your people, but our people are used to this. And we know how to get through this, and we know that it's community that's going to lead us through. And having those connections and being in togetherness in spaces like this and having conversations in the cover of night will allow us to be stronger on the other side. And so for communities and the impacts of communities, what I hear right now is both resilience. To Estela's point, there's a lot of protesting, there's a lot of fighting that's happening, there's 50 million court cases everywhere. There's a lot of people banding together to support each other, so a lot of resilience and also a lot of fear about what the unknown is going to be, what the unknown may be within Solid Grounds programs and our housing programs, and as an organization that's permanent supportive housing, just like Rhonda talked about, what that can be for them, and are they going to have housing tomorrow, and are vouchers going to be available, and are they going to be evicted if the vouchers aren't available, all these other things that so many people are worried about, food, nutrition, all these things, but at the same time, they find there's these moments of joy that people have found in celebrating and being together and supporting each other. And so again, when I think about the impacts of community, it is all the things that everybody said, but I also think about the resilience of our community. And that is the thing that I think gives me a lot of hope, and it's the thing that kind of guides the work of Solid Ground and has for the past 50 years.
Thank you. Regina?
I think just briefly, I want to follow on the point about community coming together and how we do this together. I wouldn't go so far as to say that I have, and my folks have joy, but I definitely would say that we have resilience and hope. And I was thinking the other day, because her book tour just started, but during the campaign, Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris reminded us that when we fight, we win. And then in her concession speech, she says, sometimes the fight takes a while. That doesn't mean we won't win. And so I think that that is something that I really hold on to. I'm a lawyer by training, kind of a social work heart in my career. And I just don't believe the lawlessness is going to be allowed to stand. And while there are some courts, as you said, that are not behaving within the scope of their intention, there are more that are. And I firmly, firmly believe that there's more of us than there are of them.
Thank you. So one of the other hallmarks of this administration has been the actions against organizations, including nonprofits that practice what they're calling DEI, or diversity, equity, inclusion. But as often the case, the administration has not really defined what it considers to be DEI or why it's a bad thing, which leads people to use the same term to refer to a lot of different ideas and values. I'm sure you've all seen this. So Rhonda, can you explain to us what DEI means to you and why it matters and how it shows up in the work of DSC?
Yeah, so DEI means to me, I'll speak to why I came to DESC. Wanting to dive headfirst into the work, job pops up, it's Organizational Equity and Inclusion Director. And it struck me because I really believe that diversity is important, of course. Diversity of thought, diversity of appearance, so on and so forth. But I believe if you are practicing equity and you're practicing inclusion, diversity is going to automatically be baked into that. Because you're going to look around and you're going to see, gosh, we're missing something here. We're missing either diversity of thought or, we all look the same. So how, the lived experience piece, I think we're going to be missing that. And so that's what really drew me to the position that I am in now. And I was very fortunate that I was able to come into the position as the first person in the position. And so I was able to build it from scratch and build it from the ground up. And so I was able to build trainings around, obviously, cultural competency and really look at, were we treating each other equitably within DESC and providing trainings, coaching, advice, EEOC-related complaints, but also what I think is unique, at least to DESC that I'm aware of, is making sure that we're treating our clients equitably as employees. And are we meeting them where they're at? So I'm sure we all know the difference between equality and equity. Everyone can't be treated equal. It's a nice premise and theory, and in some cases it is applicable. But when we're talking about a marginalized community, we really need to be meeting them where they're at. And we need to be finding out what it is that we can do to serve them and what it is that we can provide so that they can be the best version of themselves. And that's really where that equity piece comes in. The inclusivity is how they feel, right? Do they feel included? Are they part of the conversation? Do they have a voice in some of the decisions that they'll need to make? And so that's what I do at DESC. I'm proud to have a leadership team and an executive director that supports some of the wild ideas I have. So last year, as an organization with about 1,100 employees, if we count our on-call staff, we had an organizational-wide reading, the Racial Healing Handbook. The reason we chose that book chose that particular reading is because it came with a set of curriculum. It was easily digestible for folks at all levels of education. And we set up, my wonderful senior manager who's here, set up ways to have the book translated. Chapters were available both online, we sent out overviews, and really had a lot of support from the organization. It didn't mean it wasn't hard. It didn't mean some people didn't want to do it. But really had support in having the organization go through the exercise of reading and talking about the book. And I think that those things are important when you're talking about trying to, have the practice integrated into an organization is for everybody to kind of start with the same materials, because you don't know how educated or how knowledgeable people are about race and social justice. And so really wanting to have everybody have a level playing field there. And so I'm really fortunate to be at DESC, and I think that we're doing a really good job of practicing equity and inclusivity with our clients. With each other, it can be a little bit more difficult because we all feel like we all should know things. But we're really doing the work, and I'm really fortunate to be there. And I was just talking with Shalimar about, could we offer trainings to her staff because they have one person?
We have one person.
They have one person. So could we offer to have and facilitate trainings that we offer to our staff, because we're fortunate enough to have a department as well as a learning and development team. So, yeah.
Did you have to do any, was there any challenges in terms of getting folks on board with this approach or kind of moving them along in this way?
Yeah, I mean, some folks, you can't force them to
Right.
read it. The leadership team and myself felt like we wanted to mandate it, but that's a hard thing to implement across 1,000-member organization. And so, there were some difficulties there, but I think generally speaking, we did a survey and you got some marginal feedback, but most people who participated in the survey really were thankful and happy that they had a tool, whether they followed along with the book or not, as we were doling it out in the agency, that they have a tool that they can refer back to. Everybody got their own copy. So it was, a $22 book, and we bought 1,000 of them. So everyone had their own copy. They have their own copy to refer back to. And, it really was pretty lightweight in terms of how far it delved in, but really wanted to explore people's earliest memories, asking open-ended questions and things like that to get people's juices flowing as far as thinking about racial equity.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the rest of your organizations and whether you've had to alter your DEI work or even change the language as you describe it in order to comply with an order from the federal government or otherwise protect the services you provide. And whether you have or not, is there a line that you've drawn for yourself, a point that you would simply have to say no, even if it meant that you would lose funding or face other consequences that would keep your organization from doing its work? Shalimar, you want to start?
Of course. I laugh because my board chair is the one who was on stage introducing, and I think the board drew a very hard line in the sand, is what I would say. And I'm very, very blessed and thankful to have such board members with the courage to say, yeah, we're not complying in advance, so that's off the table. In fact, in our work, racial equity is embedded into the mission and the work that we do, and feel like we cannot address economic injustices and poverty in this country without talking about the systems of oppression that have created those things and caused those things to be true. And so that includes talking about racism. And so if we can't talk about it, then we can't do it. And so they were very clear in our work at Solid Ground that was not going to be an option. And so kind of what that looked like in real time is after I got that directive from the board, and I said, great, I was about to hand in my resignation if it was going to be something different. So I'm glad we're on the same page. Then I immediately went out to our staff team and started a series of roadshows with our teams, and I essentially walked through, starting in January, all the various executive orders and the federal funding that we had so that way it does not matter what level you are in the organization, like you understand our funding sources, so you kind of understand what's at risk, and then ask them their opinion, how do you want us to go about this? Do you want us to be the loudest voice in the room that is fighting against the federal level? We're going to file a lawsuit? Do you want us to be that kind of group of folks? Do you want us to be the quietest voice? Where do you want us to be in this? And it was very clear from all the surveys and all the feedback, if 5 was we're going to be the loudest voice in the room, that people wanted us at a 10. So there we go. So the board wants us at a 10. our staff want us at a 10, and so we get to be at a 10, and our community wants us to be at a 10. And that was, those three areas were really important to touch base with all three of those groups to say, because at the end of the day, we may lose our funding, and we, in a lot of ways, we have 9% of our funding is federal funding, so we're not a huge, we don't have tons of federal funding, but it's enough to be painful. It's enough that we would in programs. It's enough that we would stop doing probably housing work, and permanent supportive housing work if we had to. And but our board was willing and able to say that's okay. That's okay for us. And we want folks to, sorry, I had a little music playing there for a second. Did you like that as a ringtone? I'm on call for one of our programs. So all that to be said is our board really was very supportive of that. And we wanted to be able to go back to folks and say, is this okay? Is this a risk that we're willing to take? Because it was not going to be my sole decision. It might be, the burden that I carry in a very public way, but it was going to be a decision that we were all going to collectively make together, and bringing people together in a collective to say, how far are we willing to go and how far are we willing to risk was really important for us. So for us, no, we essentially told the government to kick rocks, for sure, without a doubt. I know my Tiffany, I think I saw Tiffany Lammer walking around here. There we go. I think she's very happy. She's our equity person. She's very happy that she maybe will have some friends to talk to. And I think a great example of this is a couple of weeks ago we were doing one of our federal contract monitoring visits, and they're very extensive and they're very long. No offense to federal folks. Everybody has to do what they have to do, but it's an all-day process, and they're reviewing all your files, and they're asking you a lot of questions, and they were asking about the work of Solid Ground and how we approach our work, and I talked about having housing first principles, and being place-based, and our DEI work, and multiple times in this interview, they stopped me, and they said, we just want to remind you that we're federal. And if we report this, lots of people are going to look at it. And I said, oh no, I'm going to keep going. And I just kept going through the list of all the work we do and how we do it, because I wanted it to be documented. I wanted people to know that organizations like Solid Ground and DSC, United Way, and El Centro, and hundreds and thousands of others are not going to back down to what we're seeing at the federal level.
Thank you. Regina?
I would say that if you visit the United Way website, what you'll see is something called the Strategic Roadmap, where about 5 or 6 years ago, in concert with the board, there was this very intentional decision to do all of our work through the lens of racial equity. And so, you talk about complying in advance, also for us, something we were simply not going to do. I will say that while leadership was certainly universally in agreement that I'm talking about internal staff leadership, that we were not going to step outside of our values to be in compliance with, bigotry and hatred. I would not say the board wanted us to be a 10. I would also say that we reminded the board that we, as United Way, really only got a small fraction of federal funding, and certainly our community partners were at much higher risk. But we essentially said, if it's not safe for us to stand in our values, then who can? And if you have that kind of privilege, you absolutely have to use that as an opportunity.
Well, El Centro de la Raza, from its inception, has been a DIE organization from the beginning. our name translates into the Center for People of All Races. And that has been, our trajectory all these 53 years, is that we are a Latino serving organization, but have a multiracial perspective. And so if you look at that in terms of a multiracial perspective, the people who are on the right side of history, in terms of politicians, community people, and so forth, that is the objective, to have our country be a multiracial organization. And the powers that be at this time do not want us. They don't want people of color in this country. Your Stephen Millers of the world, his objective is to get rid of people of color, which is a ridiculous, notion. The other thing is that in our 50-something years, we developed 12 principles that we worked by that have guided our work, from working against racism, sexism, defending the rights of workers, the environment. I don't remember them all, but there's 12 principles that are on our webpage that basically puts us, yes, we're going to provide services to our community because that eases their pain and suffering. We build relationships in that way. But again, as I've said earlier, there is all these other issues that we have to work on at the same time, and that's what we've done. And so there is conversations at El Centro, because we know that there are some Latino serving organizations that have the listing of all their staffing and the staff people and their phone numbers. And so we just earlier during this week with our leadership began a discussion about whether we should take our names off of our website, So again, those kind of conversations. But in terms of, saying that one other point that we have done is when I'm reading proposals, and normally in our proposal writing, we would say that we are going to center racial equity. And absolutely, but we also say, and low-income communities too. So, we're serving everybody in that way, because again, El Centro is applying for funding in South County and other places where if they see racial equity, well, this organization is only going to sub people of color, so we don't like that, kind of thing. But in terms of, changing what's on our website and what we believe in and what we work on, no, we're not going to do that. That's not who we are, and if they come after us, we're going to come after them too.
I love it.
Kind of thing.
Like Chicago.
And I was going to say too, we have a equity and social justice question. If you're going to apply for a job, you have to answer that question before you can even go further in the application process. And I just don't, as I hear all of these answers, there's no way. It is in the DNA of every single one of our organizations and many other organizations. When you look at the glossary that they put out several months ago about words you can't use, I mean, our website would have been blank, and we're proud to help marginalized people. It just applies so broadly to so many people, including white folks. It's just, we're not going to back down. We can't back down, because if we're not fighting for them, then who? If we're not fighting them, fighting for the marginalized folks and the folks who are unhoused, the DESC, then who's fighting for them?
Yes.
What is going to happen to them? We're their last hope in a lot of ways. So
Yes.
yeah.
I just want to add one thing that I've been thinking about in terms of the leadership that we need from, foundations in our region. I mean, I believe that it's going to get harder. We haven't seen the hardest yet.
Right now.
It's going to get harder. And we are going to lose monies. And I feel like the foundations in, Seattle, King County, Washington State need to step up.
Yep.
Like we saw what happened in 2007, where there was a focus on, what are the bread and butter programs that people are going to need. And I think we're in that stage again. How long will it take? Will it take another 6 months? Will it take a year? But, that man is in there for 4 years. So we've got to make sure that the midterms, 2026, we've got to be involved, and we've got to make sure that everybody that we know, and even others that we don't know in terms of making new friendships, we've got to get people, get them registered or get them out to vote. And again, as I said earlier, I don't know how long it's going to take them to make a decision on the Voting Rights Act. I think it just started today, and what will that be? So United Way, we see you playing an important role in that.
Thank you, and as I said earlier, know that we see that for ourselves, right? And it's why we really were so appreciative that the Seattle Foundation convened all of the big funders. Now, that doesn't mean that all of the big funders poured into the fund, right? But that's a good opportunity for everyone here to, kind of reach out and saying, what's your organization doing to support our neighbor fund at United Way? Or what's your organization doing to, support the Care and Response Fund at the Seattle Foundation? And as you said, just reminding folks that have privilege and deep, deep wealth in this community. I think the reality is they don't live in our world, so they don't actually know how hard it is or how hard it's going to get. And so it really is incumbent upon all of us. We may have neighbors that work at Amazon. We may have neighbors that, somehow touch the Gates Foundation. So, you just talk to your neighbors and share the work that you're doing and share the impact that the federal decisions are having on the people that we work with and care about every day. And I think it really is that kind of almost grassroots communication among those we know, and really helping folks understand the immediacy of, a program that feeds infants is, going to run out of funding in 1 week. Most people can't even fathom that, right? And would have no idea that it's taking place unless, those of us kind of on the front lines, share the things that we know.
And it's feeding infants, whether you're conservative or liberal.
Exactly.
It's feeding infants.
Exactly.
Thank you all. One of the toughest parts about this moment is the unpredictability of it all. Every day, communities and organizations face unprecedented executive orders, questionable legal arguments, and the destruction of norms and institutions we used to think were infallible. But even when you have no idea what's coming your way, leaders like you have no choice but to try to plan and prepare for the future. So I'm wondering, what are the human services nonprofits doing to prepare for what's ahead? And Regina, let's go back to you. What are the organizations that you work with telling you about this?
I have to admit, I wish that my directors and folks that work most closely with our grantees were here, because they could tell you more about this better than I. But what I appreciate is that certainly everyone is thinking, most people are thinking worst case scenario. And because we're United Way, they're looking at us and saying, how can you help, right? And so we're trying to be both honest about how much we can help, while at the same time telling the story, as I said, to everyone we know about what our neighbors are going to need from us, and asking them to support our neighbor fund. So I think, fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of folks who operate programs are thinking that philanthropy is going to step in and fill the gap, and certainly our goal is to fill as much of the gap as is possible. And it's simply not going to be the case that we'll be able to do that in totality. But one of the moments of hope and moments of pride that I think that I've seen across grantee organizations is kind of the adaptation that many are having through partnership, right? So where there are organizations that are doing comparable or complementary work, and folks see potentially a significant loss of funding coming down the pike, there's kind of a new level of collaboration. Not to say that folks don't already collaborate, but a new level of collaboration, recognizing, oh, we're going to have to figure out how to work together to stretch, do more with less, until we're able to use our political power to move things in a different direction.
Yeah, I would add that I think that we have to look at 2007, when nonprofits were hit very hard and foundations also were losing money left and right. And so I think organizations, community have to think creatively about how you raise discretionary money. And so in El Centro's case, you know, we brainstormed with our leadership team, and, you know, we had cooking classes that we were charging people, Spanish classes, and something that held on, and we still do it to this day, is we sell Christmas trees. You know, and you know, that's like, what, you know, 3 or 4 weeks of work, and, you know, I think now we're up to, we sold last year, I think, like close to 1,600 Christmas trees, and that was a small grant in there. So I think that, again, nonprofits have to look at other creative means, and so just recently, El Centro purchased some property in Federal Way with the objective of building housing and you know, early childhood development and so forth. Well, this particular piece of property has a skating rink on it. And so we basically said, you know, we'll run it as a business, and of course the community was extremely happy about that. And there is a source of discretionary money, and I think that people have to, you know, that was just an opportunity that fell in our lap. But, you know, what do, you know, that you do well and that you could start a business for this discretionary income? Because we cannot just also depend on philanthropy, that they're going to come through and help us out. Maybe they will a little bit, but we've got to look for our own means to do that.
I just want to say that 10-year-old Regina just got so excited when you talked about a roller skating rink. And I was thinking, oh, I'd love to go there. And then I actually thought about the probability of harm at my age.
Well, depends on the night that you come. You can have a little trainer.
Yeah, you can have a little,
Yeah,
the
so
little bar.
just, those are such ingenious ideas, right? Selling of Christmas trees. Very lucrative business heading into that 6 weeks. And I am so impressed by the creativity of your team. And I'm actually going to challenge our teams at United Way to talk with grantees about these kinds of creative ideas to help supplement income. And as you said, create discretionary sources of income when we know we're going to need it.
I also think the cadence in which nonprofits work has always been fast. And so, you know, oftentimes when I think about my role, in addition to serving and supporting community, it is also about supporting and nurturing and caring for the staff and volunteers that are under my, you know, my charge as well. And I take that with a level of seriousness that I don't take most other things in my life. And in the first couple of weeks when the executive order started to flood in, the amount of like frenzy that I saw around me, and I saw it because I would see the emails at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. of people like, I saw this thing, what are we gonna do? I saw this thing, what are you gonna do? I saw this thing, what's the plan? And I was like, I'm getting this information at the same time you are. Like, I don't know, we'll figure it out together, I promise. But part of that was to try to figure out a way of how do we use a large amount of radical transparency within our organization, both for our volunteers, our staff, and the folks that we are supporting in the community, to let them know what our plans are and what is happening, to try to calm the level of like frenzy and to move it to a level of urgency. Like, we are in urgent times, absolutely, but when we become frantic, when we become frenzied, when we become like our equilibrium is off, We make mistakes. We're very rash in our decision making. We cut programs almost immediately, and then later on figure out, oh, maybe we shouldn't have cut that program. And so if we can take a beat, right, if we can cadence things and say we are working with a high level of urgency as this time demands, and also we need to be measured about our approaches because we want to be here to support community throughout the 4 years and all the cascading and rippling impacts. Like, this is not going to just be 4 years. This is going to be another 20 years, right? Yeah. Because if we see permanent supportive housing go away, it's not going to just reappear in 4 years. Like, it's going to take years and years and years to bring it back up, right? Mm-hmm. So that's, I think, for us, in terms of kind of what we're doing, it's both thinking about social enterprises. I wish we had a skating rink. I wish we did. I wish we did so much. But also thinking about the cadencing of information for folks and just trying to keep some level of kind of normalcy as much as we can, as well as thinking about everything that we do, and are we doing this to the very best of our abilities. And I think that goes to the partnership side of things. We don't have to do everything because there are so many amazing community organizations, so many grassroots mutual aid organizations that are doing tremendous amount of work. And so maybe we don't have to do all the things. Maybe we take some of our funding and we give it to this organization over here who's having this tremendous impact, an impact that we would love to have, but we just don't have the space, we don't have the bandwidth, we don't have the connections, right? So a lot of that is around partnerships for us.
Rhonda?
Yeah, I think to your point, fiscal sponsoring could be a really big connection for us as organizations banding together and, trying to find different ways to make money when what you do is you kind of give it, can be really hard, and my ADD idea rich mind is like, maybe we can make some t-shirts and we start selling them online. I mean, I bought this off a TikTok shop, so there you go, right? It's like, they got me. So I think those really innovative way or different ways to think about how to bring funding in, but I also think fiscal sponsoring can be important because it can allow some partnerships that wouldn't necessarily be just right off the top natural. But as we're going to start needing to lean on each other and having more cohort discussions and really coming together so that we don't all feel like we're on an island by ourselves fighting this fight, I think it's going to be really important. And, to your point, I wrote down what one of my hopes is that, this administration, there's not a lot of hope there, but just to slow down and really think about the impact that not funding some of these organizations, these organizations will do to the community. And unfortunately, my kind of realist, pessimistic mind thinks that, folks who voted the other way don't realize that they voted against their own interest, and they're not going to realize it until they feel it. That's right. We have foresight. I think for those of us who are here in this room, we have foresight to see what's coming and we can see what the impact is going to be. But for folks who live in whatever bubble or, just think that whatever they hope by voting the way that they did, that they're really going to have to feel the impact to understand that, the billionaires and the very wealthy people, they're not really thinking about you. They're thinking about holding on to their wealth. The middle class and lower middle class and poor, we're more alike than the billionaires that we're voting for and that we're looking to and believing in. And so I think that they're going to have to feel it first. As you talked about, WIC, feeding infants. Well, it's going to be their infant that they're going to be looking for food for, and they're going to realize that those programs were built by us, not built by them. And so I think that they're going to have to feel it first. But I think for us, if we can band together and really keep in touch and just to see how we're doing, how are you doing, how's your organization doing, and offering to provide support to one another, I think that's really going to help us help our employees and our marginalized community.
Naomi, I have one more thing.
Yeah.
Again, a lesson from 2007 is that your smaller organizations are single-purpose organizations. Some organizations came together and formed a new organization so that they could survive. And so I just want to put that out there for
Yeah.
people to be thinking that,
Absolutely.
you're coming together with somebody else and making a stronger organization.
Absolutely.
I so appreciate you bringing the wisdom of what has happened before. I don't want to say during times like this, because I don't believe we've ever seen a time exactly like this. But I just so appreciate your wisdom and willingness to share it with us.
Yeah.
And just deep, deep respect for what you do. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Before we go to the last question, just a reminder to start thinking about questions that you might want to ask the panelists when we open it up to Q&A. So that'll be in a few minutes, so let's get those questions ready. So the last question for you all. We've had some pretty tough conversations in this discussion, and want to end on a little bit of a lighter note. So we'd like to hear from you, and starting with you, Rhonda, what hope you have for the road, what gives you hope for the road ahead? What human services nonprofits need to do to survive this moment and continue to meet the needs of communities that are most threatened by the actions of the administration?
Well, my hope for the road ahead is that we all keep fighting. This country was built on protest. It was built by protest. It was built by all of us. And that we just remember that. Also, Shalimar said something, and I really want to say that we do have the right in these trying times to experience joy. And we have to remember to do that, because it's going to fill our tank so that we can keep fighting together and keep protesting, because that's what this country was built on, and that's the foundation of the country. And I believe that's what's going to, continue to push our country forward in the right direction. And I think as far as, organizations, what we can do as nonprofits is just, again, having these types of conversations, but also having conversations, regularly scheduled programming, where we're coming together to ask and to talk about what we're all going through, because I think we're stronger in bigger numbers. And if we can align to group together and fight together for, these communities that need us, that is going to, be better and be, look better, be stronger than if DESC is just trying to fight for itself, but we're not thinking about solid ground. We're not thinking about El Centro de la Raza. We're not thinking about United Way. All of us coming together to say, this is what we want, this is what we demand, and, the impact for all of us in the communities that we serve will, feel much larger if we're together.
I think community gives me hope. I mean, it always has, and it always will. Community has never led me astray. And so I root myself really in what community wants and needs. And I oftentimes, when I'm in my most stressed out moments, I go back into community, because that is where I find my grounding and where I find my footing. And so what gives me hope is that when I'm in community spaces like this, that there are so many new faces. And it's not just the same repeat offenders that I always see in all the meetings doing all the stuff, but it's different folks who are bringing friends with them. And they're saying, hey, I know there's a Mariners game, but you want to go to this thing instead? And people are saying yes. So thank you all for saying yes. And organizations getting together, like Rhonda said, in the back, we were like, oh, we should talk about this. And I was like, Estela, I need you on this call later. And we're like, okay, we're doing all the business 10 minutes before we're on stage. That's how, that gives me hope, right? It's the joy that I still see when I'm hanging out with our program participants and our residents and in our youth programs. And it's the light that they continue to have, even though they see the news stories that essentially are telling them that they are some of the worst people on the planet right now, at least in this country, from the federal level. But yet they still show up, and they still have hope, and they still have joy. and they still have dance parties, and they still ask me to try to DJ their dance parties, even though I have not DJ'd in like 15 years. But I'm doing one next week because I promised I would. So I know. Oh, you know what? Social enterprise. DJ Shalimar's
She's
coming
a
out of
social
retirement,
enterprise.
y'all. Let's go.
She's
Bring
DJing the
the
party
website
next week.
going. That's right. Let me know. I will get you my cards. But all of those things bring me joy. Even in those moments, like being able to laugh, right? Yeah. And just have that moment, have a dance break, whatever it is. Like, that's the thing that gives me hope. We will get through this, like, without a doubt.
All right.
With some good music.
I love it.
Yes, that was fun. Shout out to my mom.
Love it. Going back to, I absolutely believe in joy. I think my Facebook page says something to the effect of choose joy. And I'd say that for me personally, that is aspirational. I will also say that I love your point about repeat offenders. And right, we love all of you. And I have historically been someone who has very much enjoyed being in my Democratic bubble and with my people. And as you talked about, community feeding you. And when, these bios used to ask what my hobbies were, I was like, well, I don't really have hobbies, but politics is my thing. Well, politics no longer brings me joy, right? And I no longer list it as a hobby. But one of the things I learned when I lived in a more conservative community about 5 or 6 years ago, quite unintentionally, was what I realized that I had a habit of doing is when I'd meet someone, I'd immediately scan for, are they a Democrat or Republican? Mm-hmm. And I learned to stop doing that because there were many good people who believed in at least half of our mission. And so I chose to try to change my behavior to start to bring them along, right? And to your point, I do believe that with the current administration, the cruelty is the point, but I don't believe that many of the people who voted for the current administration really had any sense of the harm that vote was going to have. And I do believe that there are many people who have this, oh my gosh, what can I do to help now that I see what harm has been done? And so I think also those of us who have lived very comfortably in our bubbles with our people can maybe extend a hand to our neighbor who would not typically be someone who'd want to be in this room, but to invite them anyway. And if you think they're not going to be comfortable enough to come, email them the link afterwards. And it's oftentimes in people's own homes when they're reflecting in private that, they think about what they can do. Now, they might not let folks know that they're donating to United Way or they're donating to the organizations that serve folks, but they do realize how urgently an infant needs to eat and may take action just because you've shared what the need is. I think that was a very long answer. I wasn't entitled to that much time, but thank you.
Thank you. Estela?
Okay, my hope is that we will build a strong movement in our city and Washington State. We will not allow ourselves to be silenced. We will not allow ourselves to become intimidated. We will be people of nonviolence because they want us to be violent. They want us to react to that so that they can call for the Insurrection Act, and then the what's-his-face will have immense power. So we can't allow that to happen. And in that vein, I want to personally invite each of you to the march that is happening on Saturday for No King's Day. There's a big event in Seattle Center. Folks from El Centro will be attending. We'll be around the water fountain if y'all want to look us up there too. But I urge you to be there. The numbers that we're looking for nationally is 10 million people to be present at the No Kings March. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
All right, well, that's the end of my questions. So we're about to go to your questions. Thank you so much to our panelists who gave us such incredible insights and wisdom. Yeah. We know there are many community leaders in this room who just as easily could have also been on this panel. We'd love to hear from your questions. So if we can have folks raise your, oh, that's great. Raise your hands. We'll get a microphone to you so we can get your thoughts or questions. Who's got the microphone? Okay, great.
Hi, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. Amazing. So many of the points you made today got me thinking about storytelling, learning what the real impact is of what's happening, bringing people in, all the ways that we can do this. How are you using storytelling today, and what stories are you seeing? Is there a kind that resonate more or that need to be brought to the fore right now that are urgent, and how maybe people in this room could be reflecting those out even further?
Can I start?
Yeah.
So we have an amazing director of storytelling at United Way. His name is Joe Burris, and he actually created a podcast, which is highly rated nonprofit podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, please please feel free to visit. But he is really telling those stories of community and telling the stories of need and telling the stories of joy and hope that come from the folks doing the work. So couldn't agree more that storytelling is critical and really a huge part of what's necessary at this time.
What was it called?
Hourglass. Hourglass.
Oh, yes, I love it.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Like hourglass, O-U-R, or hourglass?
I'm sorry. Hourglass.
Okay.
Like and I believe the notion behind the name was getting a sense of how do you spend your time. And so he speaks to leaders who are doing the work. Actually, the day a positive Supreme Court hearing came down, it happened that our Attorney General was scheduled for the podcast. So it's not always just kind of community service providers. It's a lot of times, folks who are doing work on a really large scale. But those stories are really, again, what help us bring in, and I love the way you reference that, bring in and welcome in folks who have the ability to join us in this kind of movement work.
Other folks? Yeah.
I wonder
Shalimar?
if solid ground folks that are on the marketing communications team, can you raise your hand or stand up just for a moment? We got a couple here. Neil's way back there. These folks are amazing. The team that we have has really taken, I think, our storytelling to the next level. It can be such a common practice to feel like you have to, one, get it right, and you have to get it right, and you have to be perfect, and you have to tell everything that you do, which essentially for a nonprofit like Solid Ground, or even like DSA, all of a sudden you have this laundry list of all the things that you do, and it's hard to kind of tell that story and digest it, right? And so instead, our communications team has really said, we want to note moments of milestones in people's lives, and we want to note moments of impact, and we want folks to tell us that they want to share that out with the community, right? Because sometimes you'll see what we call poverty porn, or the storytelling of like, I'm gonna tell the worst story about this person, I'm gonna put them on a stage, and then I'm gonna say, can you give us all the money, right? And we don't wanna practice our work like that, and so instead we invite people, if they want to share a story, to go through a process and sit down with these folks and tell their story, and then we'll record it. We'll ask them how do they want it to be published. We'll pay them for the rights for that story. That's incredible equity building. And that came out of that team. That team was like, if we're gonna do this, this is the only way we're gonna do it. So,
I think at DESC, you know, for a long time before I arrived, we were head down doing the work and hoping, you know, I think you hope and you pray that the community sees it and they interact and they get to learn your story. Well, that's not really how things are done nowadays. And so we have a really wonderful communications team. Our comms director is here as well, Brianni Ball, and we are beginning to tell our story in a much more public way. But to your point, with our clientele and our tenants, it can sometimes be hard to get them to be able to tell their story in a way that is digestible to the public. But I think we're doing a really good job of finding those folks who are able to do that. And to your point, we introduced, I was really insistent on compensating people for telling their stories and compensating them based on how we were going to use the story, because I feel strongly that most of the people, when they are telling their story, everyone else in the room is getting paid, except the person whose story is actually getting people to give the money. So that was something that I really wanted to make sure happened. Brianni really helped, you know, shape that and make it happen. And I think it's a really important thing for us to compensate people for telling their story and us using it over and over and over and over again. So we're working on telling our story. We're doing a much better job. I think you'll hear a lot more in the next 6 to 9 months because we'll have to tell our story more publicly. So I'm really proud of the work we're doing right now.
I have a follow-up question to that. How do you work with the media in that process of storytelling?
Well, for DESC, because there are people who believe in harm reduction and who don't, and believe in housing first and who don't. We really work with the media and try to do the pre-work. We want to know what the angle of the story is going to be. We do try where we can to not direct the story, but certainly to talk about what is the angle of the story that's going to be told. There have been times where I think the story was told in a way that we were not expecting. We have demanded retractions, we've demanded corrections. But I think it's really important to talk with the reporter and to really do your research about what that reporter has written in the past about other nonprofits, certainly nonprofits that are serving marginalized communities, and decide if that story is worth you sitting down to talk about it. And if it's not worth it, or you think that your story is not going to be told in the way that represents your organization in a positive light, that's not a story you should be doing. All press is not good press.
And developing positive, proactive
Yes.
Relationships with the
Yes.
press. When I was in a smaller market, I found it was, you know, easier to do that than it is, you know, with a major market like ours. But it became the case that, you know, they began to see the community organizations as the content experts. And so they would reach out to us, and we'd know that they were doing so as allies, not folks trying to do gotcha stories. And, you know, the handful of gotcha folks, like you said, when they call, we just wouldn't return those calls.
Exactly.
That I think it's mostly referred to as earned
Earn media.
media. And, you know, the folks who are doing this hard work, you know, they have earned attention on that work, of that work. And again, for all of community to know that all of community are going to need to support our neighbors.
Yep.
Estela?
Yeah, I wanted to say just the method we utilize for storytelling is obviously we put out twice a month our e-news where we tell stories and the successes that are happening. And then we're very active on social media. So that part of it. But just in terms of the relations, Naomi, with the media, is it, you know, we've been around a long time. So the media does call us like on many different things. But we also don't feel that we have to respond as in Centro. We give them who we think can have a better answer than we do. So
Love
we
that.
make referrals to other organizations that they may not know or that they're doing that kind of a work. And what that does too is it also creates better relationships between organizations when you're saying, you know, call this person, call that organization.
Thank you.
I think there's also something to be said for organizations or people within the organization to write op-eds. Those can be really useful. That's a useful tool to get your message out in the media.
I want to go to a next question. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, thanks so much to everyone on the panel for being here. It's inspiring to be in the room with you. And thanks for making the time. I've been thinking a lot about political advocacy, and there's a lot of money in politics, and that's come up in various ways throughout the panel. And one of the things that has confused me a little bit or been a barrier to me is I'm not sure I necessarily know where to plug in. I think people talked about you've heard a lot of people say, how can I help, right? And that's great. Probably everyone in this room knows we can volunteer, we can donate, and that's great as far as it goes. But I'm just curious if there are ways that individuals can plug in politically. I suspect no one on the stage can or wants to endorse a candidate. That's not what I'm asking. But are there local or state policies, votes, decisions that the city council is going to be making that would really benefit members of this community that you'd love us to get involved in, and that there's clear ways to go and write letters or get involved in any kind of way?
This is my favorite kind of question. Thank you for this kind of question. I can talk about politics all day, just like you. Maybe not right now, but so a couple of things I would maybe suggest for those that are interested in kind of getting plugged into various coalitions and networks. One is to check out the Statewide Poverty Action Network. Yeah. They do statewide work, so everywhere in every single county in the state, and they build a legislative agenda. And then they do a training on MLK Day. It is MLK Day every single year down in Olympia. And so if you've never gone and spoken to your elected official, they'll train you on how to do it, and then they'll take you and whoever else is represented by that person, and then y'all can go together and make your demands, whatever it is you want to hear and see. That's a great way to kind of get in front of it and to be supported by a community of folks that are also learning how to do that or just engaged in that work. So Statewide Poverty Action Network is kind of my first one. The other piece is there are so many coalitions within the city of Seattle. I think we've got members of the Seattle King County Coalition on Homelessness here. Yep, I saw that. There we go. So getting connected with any of there's a specific topic that you kind of have in mind, whether it's permit supportive housing or immigration rights or whatever it is, Google that thing plus Seattle plus coalition. I think we still plus things in Google.
Yes,
can we?
can
That's what I still do. I don't.
Yeah, no more dial-up.
There we go. Okay, there we go.
Still,
And then you will find the various coalitions that are doing that work, and then just reach out to them and find out if they have a meeting, how to get engaged. Is another kind of great step to kind of get plugged into some specific things that you're personally interested in. Always vote. Always vote. Always vote. Always vote.
Every election.
Every election, vote. I would, again, thank you. Yes, we cannot endorse specific candidates. I would say that I hate to be not quite the worst state, but the second worst state only to Florida for our regressive tax structure in Washington state. And so things like the Seattle Shield for Seattle base voters that is going to be on the ballot coming up very shortly here, I would research that and vote accordingly. And I think my board chair is going to come up here and tell you exactly how she thinks you should vote, so I'll let her do that.
Same with the
there we
theft
go.
levy.
Yes.
I was going to say, I agree that joining coalitions that align with your passions is a great idea. And there are some folks who are not coalition people, right? And they want to know, what can I do from home, kind of in my comfort zone? I don't necessarily want to go to Olympia. Well, as we know, COVID was horrible and destructive, but out of that came now testimony happens online. And so you can, as well as in person, but you can look at a council agenda online and see if there's an issue that you want to lend your voice to and sign up to testify about it.
I would say do your own research. Stay off the neighborhood pages and, please form your own opinion. If you hear something that piques your interest, go do your research to find out if what they're saying, one, is accurate, and two, if it really aligns. I think that, in the information age and just kind of these sound bites, we've lost the desire to really find out if this is what's right for me, if this cause is what's right for me. We're listening to our friends, which, yes, we trust our friends, but we're listening to our friends, we're listening to the news cycle, we're listening to our neighbors, we're on the neighborhood Facebook page. Get off of that.
Get off.
And please do your own research and vote based on what is inside your heart, not what someone is telling you should be inside your heart, or some kind of bullet pointing that applies to you, that you think applies to you. Do your research.
Estela, did you want to answer that?
No, I think they've said it really well. So
Okay.
thank you. Thank you to my sisters.
Great. Next question?
Hi. Thanks for all the great advice on getting involved with policy, but going back to storytelling, I was curious to take it out of the marketing and communications side and thinking about on the fundraising side. And Shalimar, I really appreciate that you brought up, the horrors of poverty porn. Can you talk a little bit, because I think in fundraising,
Yes.
it really shows up there, and I would love to hear about how you're walking that line, particularly, we're all here thinking about the cuts happening at the federal level and thinking about how philanthropy is going to have to, we need it to do a little bit more or a lot more.
Our fund development director is here, and I feel like she would hate me if I didn't allow her to kind of answer this question, at least for DESC, since we're such a large organization. So, Brianni, I'm so sorry to put you on the spot. I will buy you coffee and lunch tomorrow. I didn't recruit her to DESC, but I worked with Brianni at another nonprofit, and she did such good work that once I found out she applied, I was like, and we're hiring her. So.
My gosh. So we take a really strong stance on my team of being honest with donors. And so it's been an interesting retraining with people who have grown up or not grown up in the traditional fundraising world, where you tell the donor what they want to hear, what you think they want to hear. And so we've gone to organizations like, we've met with Steve and Connie Balmer, and we've said, we would love your money, but only if it is for what we need. And that is unrestricted, and this is why, and here's the impact. And we are the subject matter experts, and so philanthropy needs to recognize that. And honestly, they agreed with that, and it was wonderful. And then even though their executive director was like, we don't make asks during site visits, I was like, and we would love it if you would convene other philanthropists and talk about this need that you have just learned about, because we talked about the very high level impact instead of in the weeds of our programs. Everyone wants to talk about the weeds, right? But the weeds aren't what everybody needs to know. It's not a donor's need
Business.
or right to know down to the very nitty gritty your finances, or why you do something a certain way, or why you need overhead, because give me a break, So that's been really what we do, especially with storytelling with donors, is a lot of strategy work before meeting with donors about what our lofty goals are for them. And I will say that I worked with Tracy Buck here at Child Haven. We learned a specific model of being able to bring the conversation higher about what the actual impact is and what our actual ask is. So it's a lot of retraining and a lot of telling the team that we can, and this is a privilege I will acknowledge, because DESC is large, so we can do this to an extent right now that we can walk away from a donor and we will tell them why. But I don't want us to go in and fall on our knees. We tell them what we need, and if they want to fund us, that's wonderful. We want them to join us, but also one of our goals, as primary goals as a department, is educating the philanthropic sector so that it helps all other agencies who don't have a voice in that room, like Rhonda was saying.
And the last thing that I really appreciate about Brianni's department is that they have gone back to donors who were giving before she arrived and said, hey, we need you to unrestrict this gift, or we need to redirect the money to this particular program or particular thing. And she's been very successful in getting donors to, reevaluate or, shift the focus of their gifts. So
I love that strategy.
Hi, Tracy. Anyone else want to answer that question before we go to our last question?
I think just maybe going to the storytelling and the poverty porn side of things. I keep using that term, but
Very
it is what
accurate.
it is. But the idea that you put someone on stage, or you publish a story, or you feature them in a video, and it's like at their worst. They're like the most destitute, the most needy. I think in my time, I can probably name hundreds of organizations that I've seen that have had storytelling that is like that. And what we have found at Solid Ground is that, yes, it elicits an emotional response, but it's not the actual emotional response that we want. The emotional response that we want is one of hope, is what happens after that. It's not the destitute side of it. It is when someone with their own free will comes to an organization, seeks out services. There's a lot of work that individuals do to get to places like DSC and Solid Ground and El Centro, and then to be able to say, I'm at a point where I need support, or I'm at a point where I want to change my life, or whatever it is, and then we celebrate that journey, and we document the journey of them doing a little bit of that work, and then more importantly, we talk about what happens on the back end, right? So we tell the story of the family who has this center of connectedness, and not only are they a family that at one point maybe felt like they didn't have any community, but now they're a family where they all get together as a larger community, and they're all taking care of each other, and they actually don't even need Solid Ground anymore because they have found each other, and they are now their network. That's the story that we'd rather tell. That's the story that we'd rather tell to donors, particularly individual donors. Foundations, very similar to what we heard here. We are not particularly interested, we don't chase money. Like, the work that we do is the work that we do. And we're not necessarily doing like the dog and pony show and the dance. I'm not going to dance on your stage in a certain way.
But you might DJ.
But I might DJ. I might DJ. There we go.
For a smaller, not so small gift.
For a very large gift, I will DJ a house party. But that idea of like the work that we do is so important, is so vital, and we want to tell the joy of it. And that's where I say, like, I always find joy. I always find joy in the stories, and in through the struggle that people have, it's the other side. So, and that's what we try to capture.
yeah.
I think we have time for one more question.
Naomi,
Yeah.
I have a couple of points that I want to make.
Okay.
Obviously, fundraising is a hard job, and you have to build relationships with those funders. So send your annual report, make sure they get your appeal letter. For instance, what we've done over the last several years at our gala is that we recognize smaller organizations so that they can be known to the broader community. That provides them visibility. But the other thing, just recently we started doing also, is that we're doing introductions to people at the Gates Foundation or the foundation of a smaller organization that we know that needs help. So as larger organizations, we have a pretty significant role to play in that way that will help. And what we've seen is that those funders then, entertain, and, I don't know what the decisions are all the time, but at least there's a communication that has started between them.
Yeah.
And they're willing to receive an LOI letter or, that's a tremendous way to use your
Yeah.
expertise and privilege. Thank you.
So let's get just one more question.
I have one right here, but I just want to say, because I'm a fundraiser in the room, I know some other people are here, but if you want to learn more about a fundraising model grounded in equity and dignity, visit communitycentricfundraising.org. Brianna. Hi, thank you. So I think what is relatable to all of us is that our focus is
on the most underserved folks in our communities. But I do wonder, as such power players in this industry, during these fraught times, what are you doing to care for your employees and support them? And in particular, the ones who are on the ground doing the direct service work on a daily basis, and especially for organizations that prioritize hiring folks who reflect the diverse backgrounds of those you serve. I'm curious about if you've done anything, even in the past 10 months, to change or help bolster and support your workforce to prevent burnout and, having them land in a place where they may need your services.
Great question.
I know for DESC, we encourage people, we have a really pretty generous PTO accruement program, and so we encourage people to use their PTO. I always like to say, like, the place isn't gonna burn down if you take a couple days off. So we definitely encourage people to use their PTO. We have regular, monthly, sometimes bi-monthly staff support groups for frontline staff, and then we have staff support groups for supervisory staff because we find that they don't want to be together, which is fine. I think that's totally appropriate. We obviously have our, I think everybody has like an EAP program where we have our intrasite. We have caucusing for culturally relevant groups or folks who identify specifically in the way that they identify. We have caucusing that's available for them. That's monthly as well. I know we can do more. We do encourage, we have regular supervisions because we have case managers, and so there's supervisions that happen with their supervisors, and we encourage the supervisors to allow time during that supervision to just listen and hear about the things that are challenging, that we know are challenging, but how it's impacting folks. And just today, I used one of my colleagues as a time to share because I was super triggered by the conversation around know your rights and the immigration attorney that was there just as a person of color in the community. So we do try to do as much as we can, and I know that we can do more.
I'm going to
Agreed.
ditto.
Yeah.
Ditto all of those things. Go ahead, and then I'll round out.
So we do the basic stuff, in terms of having activities around health throughout the year, and, people walking so many miles or doing whatever type of exercises, and there's prizes, and people obviously get very excited about that, and good health benefits, personal days off. We actually expanded the definition of sick leave in our organization in that if a person doesn't feel good, or I feel like I want to go hiking because that's going to be a good mental health day for me, we allow that. You need to go do that, go do that. That's fine with us. But what I think is extremely important that we do, and we have done this for 50-something years, is that every week we have something that is called charla, and it means a discussion. And so staff come together on Thursdays at 1:30. Whoever can, leave their responsibilities. Obviously the people who take care of kids can't leave their responsibilities. And I've always said, please don't go to charla and then tell me that you didn't get the billing in or you didn't get the report in. You got to take care of business also. So this meeting that happens once a month, we're dealing with topics of the day in terms of what's happening in our country right now. We're organizing who's going to go to city council and speak. We celebrate birthdays, on once a month during that charla time. So that, there's a sense of belonging and, of building family, if you will, if you're doing that kind of activity. And we know that that is essential because we've done it for 53 years.
I love that. Love that.
Shalimar, do you want
to? We do very, very similar things that you heard already from Rhonda and Estela, but I have so many dreams and hopes, and I appreciate this question so much because it's something that gets undervalued and under-recognized quite often in nonprofit work is the people that are doing the work every single day. And the challenge that also comes when you run 24/7 programs, you can't just have the thing once at 9 a.m. If half your staff team works overnights. It's not going to work. It's not their schedule, right? So, the things that I dream about that I'm constantly harassing our grant folks that are in this room, like, find me money for this, please, let's figure this out, is trying to figure out for folks that are working in very, very high stress roles, so residential, things like that, is offering some sort of respite schedule. So that way, that, if they're working and it's not their PTO, and they don't have to tap into that, but it is, after a couple of weeks, that they get a period of time off for them just to take a break. And it might just be a period of time off where they're doing other types of work, they're doing their professional development stuff, they're doing stuff that they want to develop and do, but that they don't necessarily have to be in a housing program and face the stressors that come with being in a housing program. I dream of a place and a time where our pay structures are equitable in nonprofits across the board. And I know that we have some nonprofits that have done a tremendous amount of work to move the needle. And we have so many of us that have to continue to work to move to that new threshold. And so us being able to speak that into existence and say, like, yeah, the salaries are not enough. And we need to do something about that. And we need funders, particularly public funders and contracts, to understand that if you want me to sign a 5-year contract to do this work, and then you just keep the money the same, how am I supposed to give pay raises to people? How am I supposed to get COLAs to people? How am I supposed to make sure that they have enough PTO? That we have to find the money other places, so the braiding of funding. So there's so many hopes and dreams, and a lot of it starts with, one, I think for us, is hearing from staff directly, like, what do y'all want? And that's how we end up with this idea about respite. It's how we end up with ideas around sabbaticals, and Estela and I were talking about sabbaticals earlier today, and that need for having intensive amount of breaks for folks that have been in and committed to the work for a period of time. Ideas around trying to develop folks and giving people substantial amount of money for them to do their own professional development. It could be education, it could be other sorts of things, whatever they want to do. Like, just go and do it and have fun and learn and thrive. And be able to find the funders who will pay for those things, who aren't just saying, yeah, I don't want to pay for that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that's important enough, and that's not a good enough answer for us. So,
Thank you. Well, thank you all so much for your honesty and your commitment to being here, and thank you all for your excellent questions. I'm going to turn it back over to Hannah to close us out with a few words.
All right, thank you so much, Naomi, and thank you to all our panelists today, and also thank you all for your thoughtful questions and adding to the conversation. So the organizations that are represented today on stage are doing some incredible work and work in our communities, and so please consider donating your time and your resources to continue their work through these challenging times so they can emerge stronger, healthier, and more resilient. So thank you again to DESC, El Centro de la Raza, and United Way of King County. And Shalimar, of course. Yes. Okay, how are we all feeling after that? That was a lot. That was some real talk, some chisme, am I right? So you're probably wondering, what can we do about this? And that's a great question, because we have 2 action items for you today, because we all know that the only way to get our elected leaders and governing bodies to do what we need them to do is by telling them. Tell them loudly, tell them often, bring your friends and neighbors, because that is at the very core of community advocacy. All right, so y'all ready for the action items? All right, so everybody has their inflatable frog costumes, right? Because Halloween, right? Right, okay. Okay, so the first action is, right at this very moment, you can help protect housing stability here in Seattle and King County by telling our local lawmakers to protect investments in permanent housing, which are currently at risk due to federal cuts. There is a QR code on the screen right there that you can scan to learn more about that. Okay. So for our second action, Our second action is for the November election that is coming up in a few weeks. Check your ballot for the Seattle Shield Initiative that proposes rebalancing the city's business and occupation tax so that large mega corporations pay their fair share. And right now, I just want to briefly point out Finica, who is our community policy specialist at A Solid Ground. And a couple days ago, she briefed the advocacy committee about the mayor's proposed budget. And did you know that the expected revenue for the Seattle Shield Initiative is already built into the budget? So the new funding will go towards funding emergency shelters, homelessness prevention, food access, and other services that organizations like Solid Ground provides. So we cannot go backwards on community investments. So please consider voting yes on the Seattle Shield Initiative. This does not violate our organizational thing because we can endorse initiatives. So ballots will be hitting your mailboxes very soon, so fill them out and return them by the deadline on Tuesday, November 4th. And if you're interested in learning about more ways you can advocate for human services in King County, please go talk to Finica over there, and she will be happy to share more information. And that is the end of our program. Thank you again to the staff of Town Hall and Solid Ground. Please help yourself to whatever's left. And travel home safely, and we will see you at the next Social Justice Salon. Thank you. Maybe they'll do it over there. Oh my God, thank you.